Hi, in this video I want to talk about value and in a way it contrasts in the world that we're living in, the existence that value exists in. We're living in an existence that has no purposeful function based on not necessarily just on our the function of what the human being or the value or the sentience wants to define, but no function, generally speaking, in and of itself. Intrinsically, there's no intrinsic function that has any purpose beyond the purpose of function of survival for the living thing that was based on the function of the creation of a living sentience in this reality in this universe. We're just a byproduct of these um, of just movements and these combinations that led to the existence um, of a byproduct that we call sentience, a DNA molecule that found a way of end up replicating, which is another function. But the function doesn't serve any intrinsic value other than a function of it serving itself to replicate based on the function that was created by the universe or the way the universe was created. A function of spreading and movement and of replicating and moving around and causing more interactions to bump into each other and cause more interactions and so on and so forth. A process that's of cause and effect. That's a process of the function of the universe that we're living in, and that's exactly what we're a byproduct of, and that's exactly what we're living in. So it's more like a meaningful value in a meaningless universe. There's no real function. There's no intrinsic function. There's only a function that exists, and that existing function doesn't serve any real purpose other than to perpetuate what already exists, and it already adds pain, adds more insult to injury when you realize that there's only avoiding pain, preventing suffering, and that's the only function that we're serving. Not only is there anything not to accomplish, but it's only about avoiding, and it's more or less pretty much the same thing. It's tied together when there's nothing to accomplish. It has to do with just avoiding, and that's when it's all about avoiding, that serves as the only function, and it serves as the only purpose is to avoid the pain or avoid the suffering or avoid the tension or relieving the tension, and that serves as realizing that there's no function to be served um, in this meaningless existence. So you could tie the two together and pretty much see them as the same thing because they're not really serving any real function. Anything that we do is just a matter of self-perpetuation, and the lack of function and the fact that we're not the only thing there is to avoid are pretty much synonymous. Um, there's nothing to accomplish, and there's nothing to do except relieve tensions and avoid pain, or avoid suffering, preventing suffering, and that's the only real function that we're serving on this in this life game and the sentience game that we're experiencing, and that's really all that there is here. Nothing more, nothing less. So the basic idea that laying it out based on its foundation is a meaningful value in a meaningless universe or a meaningless reality and existence. But we are a byproduct, we are a function, and we're just something that exists as a possibility, and that's the only thing that is being served by this idea. Nothing more, nothing less. Like I always say, apparently. But there's nothing really else here. Except our own delusions of projection, projections of value, and obviously anything that has a value outside of us that we give value to has a value because it affects us, but it doesn't have intrinsic value. And the only thing that has intrinsic value is us, and everything else is just a projection. It doesn't serve any real function, and it only can be chalked up to some kind of addiction. It can be easily changed. When it's not an innate value, it's something that can be easily changed and easily manipulated to be changed. Obviously, the value can change by coming in and out of existence, but the value itself is there, and it can't really be changed. It's incomparable, not only that, but it can't be changed in the fact that, generally speaking, it's the same regardless of the value holder, and it's something that exists in every value holder, um, regardless of the amount's there, and it's a function that exists. But everything outside of that can be easily changed, and it can be chalked up to an addiction that the sentient thing is experiencing. Otherwise, um, the sentient experience wouldn't be considered as much of a sentient experience if it wasn't something that can have some kind of addiction, if that can be understood. So that's the basic idea, I suppose. Um, I mean, there's not really much else to mention on the subject, except, mm, no, I don't really think there's anything else to mention. So yeah, the basic idea is a meaningful value and a meaningless existence. We're just a byproduct of this existence, and there's nothing else to gain. And the basic function is to replicate self-replicate based on our function, based on a DNA molecule. And there's nothing else to gain here except to avoid the suffering, and that lack of function and that avoiding of suffering or avoiding or preventing of harm is essentially the synonymous with each other. When there's nothing to gain, it's pretty much the same thing as saying there's only things to avoid. There's only obstacles to move out of the way of. There's only addictions to satisfy or to eliminate. But the only way to really eliminate the addiction is to eliminate it at its roots, and that is by eliminating the thing that's causing it. And that thing that's causing that addiction is the sentience, at least the sentience the way that we know it now. And the thing that feeds our sentience and gives it any kind of reasonable human or understandable sentience given purpose is the addiction that we have. And without the addiction, there's not going to be much here for us to help perpetuate the self-guided purpose that we find ourselves existing for. So that's really the only reason why we're finding any reason to live is based on our addictions and our ego gratifications, satisfying our egos and satisfying our pleasures and intentions. And without that stuff, there's not really much else to really anything else to gain here. So that's what we're relying on more than anything. So without those things, we're not really going for anything. And without those things, there's not going to be any function. So it's really between a rock and a hard place. And there's not really much here to gain. But we need those things that drive us to be addicted. Those things that are only a detriment to us. We need those things to exist. And that's where we're stuck. There's nothing else to do but be stuck. And that's, I suppose, a source of constant frustration. But sometimes people just don't realize it. They're too caught up in the game, but that doesn't mean that the game isn't existing and they're not being played by the game. The game's playing them. They're playing the game, but the game's playing them by them still finding some kind of thing to be addicted to or falling back on something to rely on, like a religion or a god or something, to make themselves have purpose in this existence. So a lot of that's just essential basic addiction that people rely on. So I think that's all I need to mention in this video. So thank you, and until next time, if there's anything else to mention, like always, there's always another video for another time. So thank you, and until next time, bye.